This is Good Morning Mumbai, and you're with Hrishikesh.
Radio 1.
America and Sanjay Arora shouting out there. You're a big fan of America. I know you can do magic. A man who's done magic in the corporate sphere. My guest of the day is chairman at Marico, Mariwala. Wonderful to see you. And
Thank you for getting me here.
and I believe you're up at 6 o'clock every day.
No.
working out.
Today only I got up early because I had to come here. Normally exercise in the evening, but today I'm taking a flight. That's why.
Wonderful. Tell us about the early days when the business was the Bombay Oil Company, and at what point precisely did you feel you needed to start branding, which eventually led to the formation of Marico, which is 1990, wasn't it?
Yeah, 1990 Marico was formed, but I joined the organization Bombay Oil in early 70s. And it was a very small family-managed organization. I was the first person from the next generation. And at one level, I was given a lot of freedom to do things which I wanted to do. It was completely family-managed, no professionals. So I started dabbling into different businesses at that time. We had chemicals business, we had an edible oil business, and we had a spice extracts business. And that's how I got into business. And I just started exploring on my own. What could I do differently?
So what was the point you said, now I've got to brand this?
Yes.
And take it to the next level?
So I realized that edible oils in loose, we were selling mainly in loose, was not really a business which was very profitable, not sustainable. And if we converted that business from loose to packed, branded, I think that will be far more profitable business, and it'll get us an entry into FMCG business.
And that's what happened in 1990 with...
No, I would say in early 70s only, in mid 70s. Within 4 or 5 years, I started traveling and going into interior markets and started appointing distributors on my own and started retailing products. And because there were no professionals, I had to do everything on my own and started retailing the products and then started recruiting talent and started distribution expansion.
And Marico is obviously the Mariwala company.
Yes, it has come from Mariwala. Yeah.
Very nice. The motive behind starting the Mariwala Health Initiative, something
Yes.
that you're very, very passionate about.
Yes.
Talk about that.
I think it's basically I want to give something back to the society because I think every person has to have a purpose in life, and I wanted to do something which is purposeful. And after evaluating various options, I realized that this is one area which has been neglected. A lot of people are suffering from it, but nobody knows that they're suffering. There is a lot of stigma attached to it. And the prevalence of the need for improving mental health is very, very high. And nobody else was doing it in a structured manner, in a manner which was far more holistic. And we thought that if we could do this, I think we will be giving something back to the society.
Wonderful. Love is All Around by Wet, Wet, Wet. Remember the Four Weddings and a Funeral original motion picture soundtrack. Mariwala, Chairman Marico. Wet, Wet, Wet. Love is All Around. Thank you very much. Kapil Cricket. You were waiting for the clock to strike 9, and it has struck 9. It's 9:05. Sujay Kannan, glad you're enjoying the interview with Mariwala. Saurabh Shah, thank you, buddy, for being tuned in. Good morning, Jiten Bhagat. Glad you like America. And Kasturi, have a fabulous day up ahead. Chairman of Marico in studio, Mariwala. So, do you remember the Mariwala of the 70s when you started off in the family business?
Yeah.
And you want to compare that young man to this young at heart man. Are you still a risk taker, or have you mellowed down?
Yeah, I still take, but I take deliberated risks. I calculate risks, as they call it, and whenever there's a right to win, I jump into it. But I'm very much same, actually. I'm as fit as I was in my early 20s. I exercise every day. I think I'm as energetic as I was. So, and as much desire to win, desire to succeed, a burning desire to do something. So I would say that yes, it is. I've changed. I've learned a lot. Learned a lot from people. Learned leadership style. Learned management. But fundamentally, I think I'm a same person as I was at that time.
Yeah, wisdom is wonderful, isn't it? What are the mental health concerns that are still going unrecognized in this country? Let's address that right now.
See, I think first of all, because it is not visible, the mental health, and that's the reason why people don't realize that the magnitude or the percentage of people who are affected by mental health is very, very large. And that's the reason why it has not been paid attention to. You have hospitals for cardiac, you have diabetes, but a number of psychiatrists or number of call centers are so few. And on top of that, there is a stigma attached to in the society that what will others think if I go to a counselor? So there is a huge need in terms of attending to this area. And I can tell you that this can be solved, just like your other ailments can be solved. Mental health most of the time can be solved if it is addressed at the right time. So it's very important that we all realize that many of us can face mental health problems, and it's very important for us to go to a counselor or to a call center. And it's perfectly normal to do so. Let there not be any stigma attached to it, because if you are going to suffer from mental health, it can have various ramifications in terms of depression, worst case suicides, bad habits, drugs, alcohol, impact on work. So I think it's very important that proactively this issue is addressed, and people do not hesitate to go to a counselor or make that phone call, which will make a huge difference.
Just like you go to an orthopedist if you have a bone problem, or a cardiologist if you have a heart problem.
So I think parents have to encourage their children to come out. I think everybody has to encourage each other, And as Deepika Padukone has just gone public, and she said that it's okay to, I have had problems. So if she has had problems, then I'm sure many of us have had problems. And at some stages, each of us goes through some stress.
Of course.
And with increased urbanization, no nuclear families, work pressure, exam pressure, admission, job, I think the stress is just increasing day by day. And we need to find out some way to address this.
I know that you exercise to de-stress. Yes. Anything else that you do? Are you a meditation person? Are you a yoga person? How does that work?
No, I don't. I do a little bit of yoga, mainly for my back, but I used to do meditation in the past. I don't meditate now. I don't need to meditation because I think I don't have too much stress as of now.
Lovely.
For the last few years, I am leading a very structured, disciplined life, which is very important.
Wonderful.
To manage stress.
And which is why I love the fact that people like yourself, people like Deepika Padukone are actually addressing this issue and spreading some light on it. Let's come back to the business now. At what point did you feel you needed to expand from an edible oil base to a full-fledged consumer goods business? You talked about it very briefly, but I want to talk more in terms of the acquisition of, for example, a Set Wet or a Zetak. Talk about that.
See, I think every organization has to move. We started with edible oils. Coconut oil, Saffola, and then we went into other hair oils, and then we went to other hair care products. From there we went to value-added skin care and other hair care products for pre and post-wash. And then we started acquiring companies in India as well as outside India. So we made acquisitions in Egypt, Vietnam, South Africa, and we also expanded beyond India. So today about 25 to 30% of our business comes from outside India. And in India also we made some acquisitions. The latest acquisition we made was in some of the brands which were started by Paras, mainly two brands, Set Wet and Levon. So I think the journey has started over the last 15 years or so. And as you realize that you need to...
920, it's Faith by George Michael. Faith is part of the makeup of most captains of the industry, and really, Harsh Mariwala is one of them. Chairman of Marico in studio.
This is Good Morning Mumbai, and you're with Hrishikesh.
Radio 1.
It's wonderful for those of you who tuned in late. He was just talking about how he expanded the business internationally from a fledgling edible oil business. Cross-pollination of ideas across markets. So what are the lessons or the learnings that you could take from, let's say, emerging markets like Egypt and the Middle East, and then use it in India and vice versa? Talk a little bit about that.
See, I think first of all, we get to know the customer and how the customer behaves. For example, if you are in a range of products which is for youth, we are in gels, hair creams, and we have a big presence in Egypt. So that helps us understand what is leading to the penetration of gels and creams in that country, and how can we increase that penetration in India, because the penetration there is far higher, the penetration here is much lower. So can we take the consumer learnings from that and apply it to our brands, which is a different brand in India, but that's okay. But consumer understanding, consumer insights in terms of what leads to an expansion in the market size is something which we've been doing by cross-pollinating. We also are actually taking formulations from one country to another. We acquired a hair care brand in Malaysia, and some of the formulations we brought it to India. Some of the formulations have gone to Egypt. Some of the formulations from Egypt have gone to Bangladesh. So there is a cross-pollination of formulation, understanding of consumer, and also brands. So when you acquire a brand, then you say that, okay, can I sell the same brand to some other country? So we acquired a brand in, say, Vietnam, and now we are selling that brand in neighboring markets like Cambodia. We're also selling it in our existing markets like Burma, Myanmar. So I think a combination of cross-pollination of brands, consumer insighting, consumer penetration, formulation is something we've been doing, and that is the advantage of actually operating globally, because you can actually, if you are in similar categories in different countries, there is huge learning in terms of how can you transfer that learning or brand or formulation from one country to another country.
Wonderful. Let's come back to MHI, which is the Mariwala Health Initiative. What is the vision that MHI has to try and solve this complex issue of mental health, and also talk about the key people?
Yeah. I think the key people, let me start off with that. When I was doing insighting in terms of what cost to back, one realizes the family. So in one of the conversations with my daughter, and she's passionate about this subject, and she knew a lot about this subject, and that was one of the reasons why I started backing this initiative on mental health. And she has a big vision on this, and I also have thoughts, but I think she has much better thoughts in terms of being a thought leader in this space. So how could you create an ecosystem wherein actually you get all the stakeholders? And this is the first initiative of mental health, which is I call center. But beyond that, we need to do much more in this area. So this is just the beginning, and over a period of time, we want to be thought leaders. We want to create an ecosystem where we get all the players on board. We create much more awareness. We reduce the stigma. We work with some specialists. We take steps to actually improve mental health on a proactive basis rather than on a reactive basis. So how do you do meditation, or how do you basically deal with mental health on a proactive basis? So if you create the right ecosystem, then I think the problem will be resolved. And you'll be shocked today that 1 out of 4 Indians suffers from mental health issue. And one out of 3.5 lakhs mental health counselors are present for one for every 3.5 lakhs. One counselor for every 3.5 lakh Indians is available.
That's quite appalling. Yeah.
That's quite appalling, compared to any other penetration of any other medical doctors. This is very, very low. So that itself shows that the penetration of number of counselors is very low, and this has to be
like a lady, Celine Dion. Part of the pleasure of being on air is your intelligent questions. Thank you so much. On Twitter, Arun Rao. Some say leadership is measurement and control. Others say employ the right people and set them free. Where does Mr. Harsh Mariwala stand on this? Your answer, sir.
See, I think people and talent is very important. Yes, employing right people, but put them in roles which are based on your strengths. I am not a control freak. I like to create the right culture. Some of the controls are required, but I think the key thing is to actually have an alignment with your management team. What is the vision and how are you going to move forward? What are the goals for the year, and what is each person supposed to do? And that is measured by his goal sheet. And then create an environment of openness, empowerment, get good people, give them a lot of freedom. I'm a big believer in empowerment and some degree of risk taking, because people want to contribute and add value. So a lot will depend on the kind of business one is in. But for me, what works is getting the right people on board, putting them on roles based on their strength, and let them operate in an environment which is based on trust, openness, and experimentation.
Shubhadeep Das. I got to listen to radio after a long time this morning. Pleasantly surprised that Mr. Harsh Mariwala is on air. Thanks, Hrishikesh. We've got to thank Sir for that. Sunil Acharya. I would like to ask Mr. Mariwala that in today's dynamic marketing environment, how does a brand keep its position in place in the market?
I think it's a very good question, because I think every marketer has to address the issue. There is this thing is very dynamic, the environment, and it's very important that you stay 2-3 steps ahead of competitive pressures. You have competition in the marketplace from existing players, and then you have competition in newer places like in e-commerce and in private labels through e-commerce as well as in modern retail. So the key thing to keep ahead of others is to continuously go on innovating. It's very important that you go on innovating in whatever you do, in your product, in your packaging. You have to be 2 steps ahead of others. You can go on adding value, come out with extensions. Even in advertising, in terms of awareness creation, you have to use innovation in ensuring that your brand stays above others. And its brand cannot just rest on past laurels. It has to continuously go on improving its equity And towards that, whatever is required to improve equity, innovations, bring a purpose in the brand is very, very essential to keep the market leadership.
Wonderful. Give us the details about iCall. What really is it in terms of a helpline?
Yeah.
How can one communicate with it? And what are the kind of resources that are going to be at the disposal of people who call iCall? I mean, it's obviously not just a call center where people just pick up and say, we'll get back to you. These are trained, specialized people.
Yeah. See, before we signed up with iCall, we evaluated many other options. And we realized that iCall, which is done by Tata Institute of Social Sciences, is the best because they have trained counselors and they have a very, very professional approach to managing a call center relating to mental health. So first of all, they have trained counselors. The callers from all backgrounds are catered to. We are catering to 9 languages. And there is extensive work by the team to give quality assistance. We also have staff and technology being added to take more and more calls. So overall, I think we believe that iCall is offering very, very good advice to those who call iCall. We will expand this over a period of time. Currently, it's operating 6 days a week from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. to 10 p.m.
You'll have to repeat that. So in 9 languages, it's operating 6 days a week.
6 days a week from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. Except Sunday. We will start on Sunday also. But I think our biggest challenge today is to get more and more people to call. And we are targeting people from middle and lower income backgrounds because those are the ones who cannot afford to go to counselors on their own. And I think many of them are getting a lot of benefits. I was told that we have already been able to prevent many suicides because those guys have called us up and they were given the right advice. So it's very important that if you are facing problem, please take the trouble to call up. The calling number is 25521111.
Just repeat that slowly.
The number is 25521111.
Wonderful. That's the iCall helpline, which is supported by the Mariwala Health Initiative. Abhilash Kumar, having experienced Mr. Harsh Mariwala's involvement in developing people, I really appreciate his views on the topic. Fantastic. Draw calls come along, Parachute, Saffola, Kaya, Medicare. That's just the tip of the iceberg. The man who's built the strongest brands here, Chairman Marico, and he is very, very passionate about this endeavor of his, which is all-encompassing as far as medical health is concerned. The Mariwala Health Initiative that supports the iCall helpline. How can we as citizens in the mental health space, people who have friends and family affected by it or otherwise, use the helpline and help in this process? Talk about that.
First of all, helpline is a free line where if you make a call, you don't have to pay anything. It's a free advice given to you. Depending on what are the issues you're facing. So the number is 25521111. It's very important that you bring in the awareness about this initiative amongst your friends, amongst your family, and more importantly amongst the marginalized community. It's very important that whether it's whoever is you're interacting in the marginalized community, if you can bring in awareness about this, I think that will be a great help to us because our challenge is to create awareness about this new initiative. We have a call center which has more capacity to handle, and if more and more people are aware that we are offering this service, which is absolutely free, it'll help us a lot. Many times we don't realize that somebody else is suffering from this because it's silent, he's internally suffering, but he's not talking about it. So the key thing is for you to pick up that signal from an individual, or whether it's a friend or a family member who's suffering, and because many times though it is not visible, he may not be talking about it, but it is impacting in terms of either his work or his study or whatever lifestyle that person is facing, or is depressed or is not talking, he or she, sorry. So it's very important that you pick the right signals and bring in the awareness of that person to come to iCall and make that phone call at 25521111.
I saw this post on Google, and if you do Harsh Mariwala, it pops up. You have these colorful notebooks in which you note down or stick famous motivational quotes. Tell us about that. It's really fabulous.
See, whenever I read a lot, so whenever I read something, I take an extract out of that book. It could be a few lines. It could be a few words, and I stick it up into a book and I refer to it. Whenever I get time, I read that, because to me that's an extract out of the book which I can read. I don't need to read the book again. So it's a great memory, and many times I can use those quotes in my speeches, in my writing. So it's very important that, so this is like a précis of a book, something which is appealed to me. And good way to capture this is in a book, and I share also this with my team members, and they also value it because they don't need to read the book, they just read that part.
And apparently giving away books is one of your favorite pastimes. Your favorite hobby is collecting them and then eventually giving them away.
I think you can't go on storing books beyond a point. So, once you've taken the extract, then many times in your own journey, in the initial part of my journey, I was reading books on functional subjects like marketing or HR. And then after a certain period of time, I started reading books on leadership or culture building. So the initial phase of whatever marketing HR book was not relevant for me then. So I said, why not give it to somebody else who can actually get benefit out of reading that book?
You're such a voracious reader, so it's very difficult for you to pick just one book. And I'm saying some books that have really influenced you. A suggestion for any young entrepreneur out there who wants to be the next Harsh Mariwala.
See, I think 2 or 3 books. One is, if you're a larger size organization, I read a book recently, about 2-3 years back, Firms of Endearment. And that book talks a lot about what is the purpose of an organization. It is just not towards shareholders, but towards all stakeholders. So whether it is shareholders or whether it is your employees or customers or your key associates or the society, and all these are interrelated. So if you actually do something good for your customers, you will get the benefit and others will get benefit. So the whole ecosystem of all the stakeholders is interlinked. And I think organizations are created to give something back to each of the stakeholders and not just shareholders. So that was the book which was covered by Firms of Endearment. I think the other book which I have been passionate about is The Blue Ocean, which actually identifies which areas you should operate in. How do you create a right to win? Because in a highly competitive environment, you need to create a right to win to succeed in the business. So how do you create the right to win to succeed in the business? And that book is covered very well in terms of how do you create a right to win and where do you operate in an environment which is competitive and where you can succeed. I think the third book which I would talk about is on execution, because strategy is good, dream is good, vision is good, but ultimately it has to be executed well. And a book on execution written by Ramcharan is very good. It just says how do you improve execution in an organization. So I think strategy is important, execution is equally important.
Fantastic. A last leg of conversation with Harsh Mariwala up ahead. Your last chance to ask questions. One space your query name to 53650. HRISHIKY on Twitter as well as Facebook, and facebook.com/radio1.mum. Like the page, post on the timeline or inbox us. See you in a bit. Messages and back at 9:55.
94.3 Radio 1.
John Mellencamp, Wild Night at 9:42 in the morning. Chairman of Marico, Harsh Mariwala, is in studio talking about his life and times and areas of particular interest and concern for him.
This is Good Morning Mumbai, and you're with Hrishikesh.
Radio 1.
How has the pricing of global crude affected Marico's businesses? Are you of the philosophy and thought that it's important to widen the market, pass on the benefit to the consumer, or would you use that margin to advertise your brand further or diversify?
See, I think first of all, we have to do what is good for growth. So if it means that we need to reduce our prices because the costs have gone down, which is going to help us grow, it's okay to reduce prices. If we think on the contrary that it's better that we can get growth by advertising more, then we should advertise more. So I don't think there's one right answer, but we will not shy away from reducing prices if our cost of raw material is reduced. And we've done it in the past, and fundamentally it has to lead to higher growth. I think as organizations, as promoters or as industries, our duty also to ensure that we pass on some of the benefits to consumers. So I think you have to look at it from two angles. If you pass on the benefits to the consumers, it will add to the growth. I think if growth is added, it's wonderful both for both the organization and for all the stakeholders.
And I think more than anything else, people start getting impatient the moment the prices go down. They don't realize that, for example, let's take a brand like Parachute.
Yeah.
You probably have inventory lying in the depot.
Yeah.
From there to reach the distributor,
Correct.
to the retail,
It
takes some time.
It takes 2 to 3 months, yes.
It takes 2 to 3 months.
Yeah.
So therein is the problem.
Yeah.
Let's now come to another question. Swaroop Banerjee.
Yeah.
I want to know Mr. Mariwala's opinion on the startup environment in
Yeah.
India. I'm a big hand to him on iCall and the work they're doing.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of his.
Yeah.
So startups.
I think it's fantastic. I'm seeing that whenever I've been talking to management students, I've gone to some convocations and addressed many of the management students. I think increasingly most of the students are asking, how can I become an entrepreneur? And what kind of, where should I start working if I want to become an entrepreneur? My advice to them is that instead of working in large organizations, you should start working in startups. Because that's where you'll get most of the experience. You'll get a 360-degree view of how business is conducted in a startup. There'll be a lot of work pressure. Rather than being a small frog in a large pond, it's better to be a big on a small pond. So it's very important that you get the right experience, and there is very high degree of interest in being entrepreneurs, and the system is now getting increasingly ready for smaller entrepreneurs to start, because private equity ventures, supporters, seed funds, angel funding is getting into place. So if you have a good proposition, but it's very important to have a good proposition. If you have a good viable proposition which can be leveraged in the marketplace, I think there is no shortage of funds, and the ecosystem is getting ready. And in that context, I want to talk about a new initiative I've taken, which is called Ascent, which is there for last 3 years. It's basically to help entrepreneurs scale up, and we are helping other entrepreneurs scale up. So if you are a certain size and if you are profitable, then you can apply to ascentfoundation.in, and we will help you scale up by creating an ecosystem, just like what we are doing in the area of mental health. We are also doing work in the area of helping entrepreneurs scale up through creating an ecosystem where they learn from each other.
So that's Ascent, ASCENT foundation.in, is it?
.org or
Yeah, actually do a Google on Ascent. .in. Kid Rock, all summer long, Parachutes, Saffola, Kaya, Medicare, that's just the tip of the iceberg. The man who's built the strongest brands here, Chairman Marico, and he is very, very passionate about this endeavor of his, which is all-encompassing as far as medical health is concerned. The Mariwala Health Initiative that supports the iCall helpline. How can we as citizens in the mental health space, people who have friends and family affected by it or otherwise, use the helpline and help in this process? Talk about that.
First of all, helpline is a free line where if you make a call, you don't have to pay anything. It's a free advice given to you depending on what are the issues you're facing. So the number is 25521111. It's very important that you bring in the awareness about this initiative amongst your friends, amongst your family, and more importantly amongst the marginalized community. It's very important that whether it's whoever is you're interacting in the marginalized community, if you can bring in awareness about this, I think that will be a great help to us, because our challenge is to create awareness about this new initiative. We have a call center which has more capacity to handle, and if more and more people are aware that we are offering this service, which is absolutely free, it'll help us a lot. Many times we don't realize that somebody else is suffering from this because it's silent, he's internally suffering, but he's not talking about it. So the key thing is for you to pick up that signal from an individual, or whether it's a friend or a family member who's suffering, and because many times though it is not visible, he may not be talking about it, but it is impacting in terms of either his work or his study or whatever lifestyle that person is facing, or is depressed, or is not talking, he or she, sorry. So it's very important that you pick the right signals and bring in the awareness of that person to come to iCall and make that phone call at 25521111.
I saw this post on Google, and if you do Harsh Mariwala, it pops up. You have these colorful notebooks in which you note down or stick famous motivational quotes. Tell us about that. It's really fabulous.
See, whenever I read a lot, so whenever I read something, I take an extract out of that book. It could be a few lines, it could be a few words, then I stick it up into a book and I refer to it. Whenever I get time, I read that, because to me that's an extract out of the book which I can read. I don't need to read the book again. So it's a great memory, and many times I can use those quotes in my speeches, in my writing. So it's very important so this is like a précis of a book, something which is appealed to me. And a good way to capture this is in a book, and I share also this with my team members, and they also value it because they don't need to read the book, they just read that part.
And apparently giving away books is one of your favorite pastimes. Your favorite hobby is collecting them and then eventually giving them away.
I think you can't go on storing books beyond a point. So, once you've taken the extract, then many times in your own journey, in the initial part of my journey, I was reading books on on functional subjects like marketing or HR. And then after a certain period of time, I started reading books on leadership or culture building. So the initial phase of whatever marketing HR book was not relevant for me then. So I said, why not give it to somebody else who can actually get benefit out of reading that book?
You're such a voracious reader, so it's very difficult for you to pick just one book. And I'm saying some books that have really influenced you. A suggestion for any young entrepreneur out there who wants to be the next Harsh Mariwala.
See, I think 2 or 3 books. One is if you're a larger size organization. I read a book recently, about 2-3 years back, Firms of Endearment. And that book talks a lot about what is the purpose of an organization. It is just not towards shareholders, but towards all stakeholders. So whether it is shareholders or whether it is your employees or customers or your key associates or the society, and all these are interrelated. So if you actually do something good for your customers, you will get the benefit and others will get benefit. So the whole ecosystem of all the stakeholders is interlinked. And I think organizations are created to give something back to each of the stakeholders and not just shareholders. So that was the book which was covered by Firms of Endearment. I think the other book which I've been passionate about is The Blue Ocean, which actually identifies which areas you should operate in. How do you create a right to win? Because in a highly competitive environment, you need to create a right to win to succeed in the business. So how do you create the right to win to succeed in the business? And that book is covered very well in terms of how do you create a right to win and where do you operate in an environment which is competitive and where you can succeed. I think the third book which I would talk about is on execution. Because strategy is good, dream is good, vision is good, but ultimately it has to be executed well. And a book on execution written by Ramcharan is very good. It just says how do you improve execution in an organization. So I think strategy is important, execution is equally important.
Fantastic. A last leg of conversation with Harsh Mariwala up ahead. Your last chance to ask questions. One space your query and name to 53650. HRISHIKY on Twitter as well as Facebook and facebook.com/radio1.mum. Like the page, post on the timeline or inbox us. See you in a bit. Messages and back at 9:55.
94.3 Radio 1.
This is Good Morning Mumbai, and you're with Hrishi K.
Radio 1.
What an energizing session in studio with Harsh Mariwala, who's chairman of Marico, talking about his life and times. Elizabeth Thomas. Harsh Mariwala, great motivator, gets social work projects done to conclusion. How does he energize himself? Well, you tuned in late. The early part of the interview, he talked about how he still works out every single day in the evening and does a little bit of yoga. Alphefius, pretty impressive. Yes, I completely agree with you. Keshavan Kasturi. While India is recognized to have huge resource in human skills on development and marketing it globally, interesting thought there. Ajay Menon is shouting out already, talking about scaling up. Buddy, you've got to go on to the Ascent website, and I'm sure if they think your project is worthwhile, they will help you scale it up. Which actually brings me to an interesting question. Recently, in a recent survey, Marico was voted the third best place to work in the FMCG industry this year. What's the secret of the robust, happy employee and employer force that you have? Some policies, initiatives that you earnestly believe in that you'd like to share?
I think overall, how do you create a culture which is challenging, which is empowering, which has a desirable future, and people can see a certain career path for them? How do you create the right quality of talent which can work together? As well as a cultural recognition. So a combination of various initiatives in terms of recognition, empowerment, career, risk-taking, innovation, and a similar type of background of people at one level, young, but at the same time diverse in terms of different backgrounds.
Wonderful. What are your favorite travel and holiday destinations? Some place you've gone and said, oh my God, I could stay over for long.
Yeah, actually, I'm more of a hill person. I don't like beaches so much. So my travel mostly is towards hills. I like nature a lot and I like playing golf. So I like to select a location where I can go and play golf. But it's okay to go to hills as long as the weather is good and I can go for my walks or if I can play golf. So it's mainly my travel is mainly confined to, especially holidays are confined to hills and hill stations.
And where do you play golf here? Do you go to Wellington or Chembur?
I play on Saturdays, I play at Wellington. On Sundays, I play at Chembur.
Wonderful. Before you go, a day in the life of Harsh Mariwala. How early does it start and where does it end?
Actually, it's quite boring, my life, day in my life, because I get up at about 7:30. I read my newspapers and I do a little bit of yoga. and by then it's about 8:45 or 9, and then I have a granddaughter, and that's first 15 minutes of the day is reserved for her. I leave home at about 9:15, latest 9:30, office by 10, and 10 to 5 I'm working in the office. But in my commuting, going to office and coming back, it's never listening to radio. It's mainly working. For me, car is a mobile office, so I'm either making calls or I'm finishing some paperwork or reading mails. And I'm back home at about 5:30, 5:45. Again, do a little bit of exercise and then go to the gym at about 7 o'clock. But before that, again, I play with my granddaughter before I go there. That's my latest passion in life, to spend maximum time with her, because that's a source of joy for me.
Wonderful.
And then come back home and have dinner and watch a little bit of TV, read, and go to bed.
Listen, I had such a wonderful time with you, sir, and I look forward to seeing you very, very soon. Thank you for your time and spending the morning at
My
Mariwala.
pleasure. Yeah.
He is on Twitter at HC Mariwala. Great man to follow. I do, so go ahead. 94.3 Radio 1 continues. It's Stereo MCs and Creation.